No one has a monopoly on the truth. Our version of our own truths are based on our own lived experiences. In this space, we welcome different perspectives to learn, unlearn, and enlighten. Welcome to The Lantern.
Hello everyone, my name is Zaina Hassim and I am a final year LLB student and the founder of Legally For You. Today I'm here with Khanyi Tshabalala. So Khanyi obtained her straight LLB degree from WITS and then practiced as a candidate attorney for 2 years in the banking and finance department. She then practiced as an associate for a year and a half in South Africa and then moved overseas to Australia and practiced for 2 years as an associate, where she obtained her law diploma and requalified as a lawyer and requalified to practice in Australia. Then she moved to the UK and practiced for 1 year before opening her Caesar Light Foundation, which is an NPO, and focuses on mental health and well-being. How are you, Khanyi?
Hi, Zaina. I'm well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, just to start off our podcast and for our listeners to familiarize themselves with you, would you like to tell us about yourself and your initiative and your NPO, Caesar Lights?
Yeah, sure. So, Seize the Light, as you mentioned, is a not-for-profit organization specializing in democratizing access to holistic well-being. And we do this through resources, community support, and various mental health and well-being initiatives. I founded Seize the Light Foundation after qualifying as a yoga instructor, and I am registered with the International Yoga Alliance. I think that it's sort of almost naturally fell together coming from a legal background and knowing very well what the pressures are within the legal sector. And then, creating something that sort of gave people a solution, the intersection bringing wellness and law together. However, I should mention that I don't only deal with people within the legal industry because through my work, I actually come to realize that lawyers are not the only people challenged by these mental health and well-being I wouldn't say problems because I don't necessarily think of it as a problem. I
Mm.
think they're not the only ones who struggle. And I think it's great to sort of pioneer a global initiative because I think we all sort of have a common interest and a common, I think, bonding point when it comes to mental health. I think somebody has a story that can help somebody else. So that's the point of the platform, is just trying to connect people and bring us a lot closer with that vulnerable sort of storytelling on these things that are just so normal and everything that normal people go through.
Yes, yes, definitely. And just on stories, would you like to tell our listeners about your story, about your experience and your passions and things that make you you, just so they understand your background?
Sure. I mean, this question to me is it's quite a broad one. But I think when you say story, do you mean specifically in relation to my legal journey or me outside of the law?
You outside of the law.
Okay. And it's funny because nowadays it's easier for me to answer that one because, I identify myself outside of the law now. So I kind of also look at myself in a more holistic manner.
Mm.
Whereas before it was very siloed because I had obviously assumed that identity of being a lawyer.
Yes, yes.
So I would say outside of being a lawyer, I'm someone who values family. Family has always been a very big part of my life and part of my journey. I'm very blessed to be supported by a very strong matriarchal family.
Mm.
My grandmother and my mother, both my biggest role models, particularly my mother. My grandmother actually was an entrepreneur back in her time during apartheid South Africa,
Mm.
and my mother works in corporate South Africa. So we've got quite a diverse range of women who have come from a diverse background professionally.
Mm.
And I don't know, how would I describe myself? I think I'm somebody who's easygoing. I get along with people quite easily. I've always sort of liked people, and I think I brought that in with me in my legal experience. I was always one of those people who made friends with my counterparts, and I know some people found that odd, but I just took the view that this transaction is going to be difficult anyway, so we might as well get on and be friends because it
Yeah.
takes so long sometimes to close these things, and there's always so much pressure. So why not be friendly and get on and argue in front of the clients? Because obviously that's what they want to see. But then call me behind closed doors and let's laugh about the day that we've had.
Yes, yes,
Um,
definitely.
and what else? I would say maybe another story that stands out for me that maybe does show more about my personality outside of the law is that I actually hugged my first associate on my first day of work.
Oh,
And I remember I remember her being taken aback by me hugging her. But I think that sort of spoke to who I was as a person and what I thought, being in a team meant.
yeah.
But she quickly had to pull me aside and say, let me be the last person you hug today. Don't hug anyone else. You're going to give everyone else a handshake. So I also had to learn, how to maneuver in that environment, being I would definitely say I'm probably more on the softer side of things.
Mm.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think in summary, it would just be a journey of a softie trying to negotiate her way in the jungle.
Love that statement, the journey of a softie. It's so wholesome, mostly for a lawyer, and someone who practices law, because usually we all just have to identify as people who are very strong-willed and have strong personalities, you know. But now, did you always know that you wanted to study law and practice law in the future?
Oh, wow. So, no, my journey actually began as somebody who focused on mathematics and physical science.
Mm,
I actually had the ambitions of being an engineer. And I think that that was also prompted by a clear understanding of what it took to survive in the legal industry and knowing that I don't necessarily exhibit those characteristics. And you know, destiny and fate, I would say, sort of came into play, and I did end up in law school.
mm,
And I found myself at a disadvantage, I would say, for at least the first 2 years because I didn't know much about the legal industry other than all the negative things that I'd heard.
mm,
And I was privileged because I did have access to senior people in a variety of roles, that being in private practice and in-house counsel. And
mm.
speaking to them, the takeaway was always you just need to toughen yourself up. It's not going to get any easier. And I was just thinking, oh my word, I don't even know how far I'm even going to get in this, to be honest, because it just sounds like something that it's so in conflict with my personality.
Yes, yes.
But I also believe that it helped me develop resilience because obviously I was thrown into that situation and I had to find my feet in law school and find my place, which, I'm
Mm,
not sure if I really did actually end up finding my place in law school because most of my friends actually were not in within the faculty. They were all from different faculties because I just couldn't really survive the competitive nature of law school and people saying, oh, I'm getting signed to this firm and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I was there like, I'm just literally trying to survive for 4 years.
mm,
So, yeah, I think I wouldn't say I was always someone who thought I was destined to be a lawyer. I think I exhibit some competencies and attributes that may make a good lawyer,
mm,
but I think it could have honestly just gone anyway.
mm. And I know you briefly touched on your experience in law school and not really having friends that were in law school, but could you just give us a holistic view of your law school experience and maybe how you dealt with some of the challenges that came up in law school and then how you overcame that?
Sure. So I would say one that comes to my mind is obviously knowing what to do after law school, because you kind of have to set the foundation work while you're still in law school, which is something that I hadn't necessarily appreciated.
Mm,
So I was challenged by understanding what good firms were in South Africa. What did they have to offer? What practice areas they were? I mean, I was coming from the background of being someone who went underground in mines and felt that that was going to be my future. And now having a short amount of time to understand a new industry and learn what's good, what's not good, who's not good, that for me was quite difficult to overcome. But I think that, as I say, these things, I think they come to teach us lessons, and that taught me how to research, right? Because then I had to, spend time researching, top law firms, as anybody would. I mean, I relied on Google. Not sure how reliable that is, but that's what I that's what I did.
Not
And
even Legal 500.
I didn't even know Legal 500 existed up until, like, I think I was a candidate attorney. So I literally knew nothing about nothing. The calls were only put into relevant mentors and things while I was in law school, and stumbling upon knowledge and being like, okay, cool. People are saying we need to go to VAC work. Hi, mentor, like, what's VAC work? And then them being like, okay, VAC work is this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I need to get VAC work. And then I'm like, okay, how do you get VAC work? But people weren't necessarily collaborative at that point because everybody was competing. And that's when I was like, wow, okay, so they won't necessarily all the social media platforms that you have now, where you have so much access to different processes. I do think that a lot of what people know now was gatekept back then. You needed to know you needed to know the right people to know when was the time to apply. We did have the career sphere, I believe, but it wasn't as big as what it is now. And obviously, if you're not connected within the university, it was difficult to know when exactly is the careers fair, because you have to go to, I know you can't imagine this as a Gen Zer, but you have to go to, like, the board at the law school and see what events are there. Whereas now I'm pretty sure it's way more advanced. Exactly. You see, it's the small things, right? So I would say it's those kind of challenges. But one thing that didn't challenge me was the academic part of law school. That for me, I think, came almost naturally. Like, I was on Dean's List in the first year. And that was when I was led to believe, okay, maybe this will work out. But, academic intellect, technical intellect, two different things.
Yes.
Academic, more within your control, technical, not within your control. So yeah, I think the realities of life after law school changes your perception on these things. But yeah, I would say that's how I sort of overcame the challenges, was just research, mentoring, surrounding myself with the right people, but also not changing myself and not getting too caught up in what other people were concerned about at that point.
And do you think that it's important for law students to establish a support system, and maybe like just having friends, like you said, mentors, and just how can they influence your career trajectory?
Absolutely. And it's not just in law school. Law school is the beginning of your connections. One thing I wish I did while I was in law school was actually connect with the people there, because I find myself connecting with them now, many years later. And I don't want to mention how many years that is, but I find myself doing that legwork now, whereas, hindsight is obviously the perfect vision, but if you start connecting with people back then, it really sets you up for your future, because you never know what you're going to end up doing, right? Most of what we want to do requires the support of people. People are at the center of anything, and that's whether you're doing profit business, not-for-profit business, whether you're an advocate, people are at the center of every single thing. So you have to appreciate that is actually the one setting where you've got access to a plethora of people, but you don't realize it because you're too young to realize it, right?
Yes,
when
yes.
you go into work, your cohort is only going to be about 30 people. But think about in uni, how many people are in your cohort? That is the last time you're going to have access to so many people. So you have to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And, I always say to people that consult with me, it takes an army, it takes a village. If you want to get to the higher ranks in the legal profession, you need to have the right mentors, you need to have the right people in front of you advising you and telling you. It's the equivalent of being an athlete. You need to be training, you need to be at the you need to be training on a daily basis. These things don't just fall in your lap. It's about taking calculated decisions at every single point. And I know that, when you're still younger, you take certain things for granted, but It's one small decision when you're 18, 19 that determines the rest of your life. And I know that that seems scary. I was also scared to, make certain decisions and commit to certain things, but that's life, that comes with growing up and committing to things. So absolutely, support from peers, so invaluable. Family support, invaluable. And then support from mentors, coaches. You need all of that. There's no way you're going to be able to ascend at higher levels in the trajectory if you don't have the right levels of support. It's just not possible.
Mm. And for students that maybe don't have mentors or are struggling just to establish relationships, maybe because they're not exposed to people in the legal fraternity beyond like their peers, how would you say they go about that?
Look, I would definitely say students these days are at an advantage because we have technology. We have platforms where you can literally run a search and access people that you see could potentially be mentors to you. But one thing to keep in mind, when you message these people, like for example, I have had certain people message me questions. What you message me tells me all about you. I'm not going to necessarily give you that advice on a silver platter. If you need to come to these people and tell them what have you done for yourself first, and then they'll be more inclined to help you. You cannot afford to have an entitled mindset. But I must say, for me, it's been very disappointing to see how entitled some of the younger generation are, because they will just outright message you, hey, and a question. And that's not going to fly. You're not going to get a response from me because you haven't observed any protocol in your message. You haven't shown me what steps have you taken to help yourself. And it's good to sort of develop and cultivate those skills early on within your legal journey, because people aren't going to help you. You're going into organizations where there's cohort after cohort after cohort coming in. People have lost their lust or their vigor or their desire to really want to mentor and coach. They've been doing that for so long. And, I think I pinpoint and identify those individuals who are still passionate about doing that kind of thing. But there's people who they've tried and tested it, they've done it. I don't want to suggest that they're tired, but they're not so enthusiastic about helping. So when you approach said individual who has mentored 20, 30, 40 people, and I mean, that I'm even being, the number that I'm even citing now is probably minimal compared to the numbers of cohorts of candidate attorneys that they've seen or associates come up the ranks. So you have to prove to this person, how are you different to everybody else? So by you just messaging someone and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this and can you help me? How have you helped yourself? Not the kind of person that you're going to want to take on. So I think it's having that internal reflection with yourself and thinking, how am I going to set myself apart when I message this person? What can I tell them about me and my journey that will convince that person and make them buy into my journey? Because ultimately, that's all you're trying to do at any point in your career, is just getting people to buy into you and invest in you.
Yes, that's such important advice that I feel like a lot of law students don't know, maybe because we focus so much on like the theory at law school that just like basic interpersonal skills, we don't know how to approach it, and then it reflects badly on us when we message people. That's very, very true. So now just onto the mental health aspect of our podcast, because that is the focus of today's podcast. But in relation to mindset shifts, how can students shift their mindset from one of self-doubt to one of self-belief if there are students that suffer with a lot of self-doubt?
So I think self-doubt and overcoming self-doubt does come with time. It comes with proving to yourself that you are capable of achieving certain things. So it's about focusing on small wins. We've all been there at certain points in your life where you set the big dream, right? But again, it's taking accountability that you set that big dream. You can equally dissect that and break it up into smaller pieces. And maybe you're just putting one foot in front of the other, but that's how you're able to prove to yourself that you can commit to things, that you can follow through on things, and that you're capable of achieving things. But, I must also say, when it comes to self-doubt, you have to also look internally, right? Is something that somebody is saying to you externally only confirming what you believe about yourself internally?
Mm,
Because nothing really that comes from the outside can shake you on the inside unless you somewhat believe it might be true,
mm,
right? So
mm.
it's about interrogating, where do these self-limiting beliefs come from? Where do they stem from? And a lot of the work that we do, in the mental health spaces is allowing people the restoration space to sort of tap back and tap into those moments of, where did this self-doubt arise? Because in most of the stories that you'll study about any psychological barrier, there is a moment that somebody can actually point to. I'll
Yeah.
make an example. If somebody has a fear of public speaking, it's usually linked to an event that happened when they were younger. Maybe
Mm,
they tried to give a speech in school and then they stuttered, and that blocked their throat chakra, but they've suppressed the memory and they've moved through life. They haven't dealt with the trauma. And
yeah.
then when you're older and you have to run a meeting, and then you have the same anxiety, you have the same fear, but because you haven't necessarily dealt with it, you don't understand that it's that moment that happened so long time ago that's holding you back now. It's that
Mm,
fear of being seen. And when it comes to the fear of being seen, a lot of how you were parented comes into play, right? If you were in a household where you got all the attention, you won't have so much a fear of being seen. Whereas if you didn't get attention, you will have a fear of being seen. And when people actually see you, you don't like the spotlight because you're not used to it. So then you don't know what to do when you have it. So
mm,
I think it's about interrogating all of these narratives that you've internalized in your subconscious. But you're only going to be able to do that when you're at a rested point, when you're at a homeostatic when you're in homeostasis, when you're at your most relaxed. That's when you're going to be able to revive those memories and understand, okay, it's that moment that did that, and this is connected with that. But it's unfortunate that obviously in today's society, we don't have the luxury of having those moments to reflect. And that's why these feelings of self-doubt will permeate longer than what they need to.
mm. And after you identify one one memory that obviously caused a lot of trauma in your life and then caused you to be a certain way, what do you do with that memory? How do you now do you start public speaking? Do you start doing public speaking more? Do you start like how do you actively take that memory and then grow from it?
So there's multiple things that you can do with the memory, right? So within the holistic space, it could be journaling. So we can have set memory as the topic, and
Mm,
then you would basically just write about how do you feel. So we focus more on emotions, right? It's about gaining that emotional intelligence. So
mm,
how does that moment make you feel? How does public speaking make you feel? And then you'll write down, and you'll surprise yourself, because when you actually start interrogating and maybe really understanding that, oh, this makes me feel like this, like this, like this, you sort of release that from the body, right? Then
mm,
obviously there is also the body keeping the score. So somewhere in the body, this trauma is probably stored.
mm.
For many of us, it's within the hips, because the hips are actually the largest muscle group, and that contains this heavy, dense fascia.
Really?
And it's then, yes, it's the hips, which is the area, because people will always come to me and say, oh my word, you're so flexible, I can't even touch my toes. And then I have to tell them that you do realize that inflexibility is linked to anger, because there's nothing in your body that has changed from when you were young other than emotions being stored. Our biological makeup doesn't change. It's the same body.
Mm.
We just add things onto it, or we
Yes,
stop
yes.
taking care of it,
Mm,
right? So it's also, depending on the circumstance, it's about identifying that point in the body and then working to also release that trauma from the actual physical body. And then psychologically, it's writing it down. And once you've written it down and released it, you can decide whether you tear that up, and that's you basically saying to yourself, I'm no longer held ransom by this memory. I'm
mm,
no longer a person who's afraid of public speaking. But then practically, it is then starting public speaking. And then maybe it is recording a few videos in your phone, and you don't need to post them publicly. But
mm,
it's the intention, it's the start. It's galvanizing that energy of, I want to start reigniting my public speaking again. but this is the way I'm going to do it. Maybe you just record a short video every day. It's a step in the right direction. So there are steps that you can take into, overcoming that fear of public speaking.
Yes, and just now in relation to the fear of failure, because I know that unfortunately quite a few students have a fear of failure and have failed modules at university. So how do you build yourself up and approach a certain module that you failed?
Yeah, this one this one is quite a tricky one, because at that point in your life you have decided to identify and value yourself and your worth based on your academic performance. So when you don't, pass a certain module or get a certain mark or whatever that you're looking for at that particular moment, you tend to internalize that narrative and think there's something wrong with you. Whereas if you look at these things objectively, what is the schooling system? What is it designed to do? Does it really reflect on your intellect, or does it reflect on your intellect in a specific manner? So I do believe with a lot of these things, there's a propensity to exaggerate the events in your mind, because your mind is built to protect you. That's one thing we have to take into account. It does a very good job of protecting you. So when you fail the module, your mind is going off and saying, we're not going to do it again because we failed. But it's about reprogramming your subconscious to understand what exactly is a module. What does a module certify? What does the module mean to me? Why does the module mean that to me? And then in having that self-reflective and interrogative practice, you're able to look at the module differently. And perception is everything. Once you see it as something to overcome versus something that's overcoming you, or something that's defining you, you'll be able to move without that attachment to the outcome and approach it in a way that you're a bit more lighthearted about it, and not thinking that something is wrong with you. It's just a measure of your intellect at that particular point, at that particular institution, with that particular module, but it doesn't speak to your entire intellect at all.
Yes, that's very, very true. And now getting over the feeling of demotivation, because obviously for some students that have failed these subjects and then have done the steps that you suggested, they may now just not want to, they want to give up. They're tired, they don't know how to approach these things anymore. How would you deal with motivation and any tips that you would want to give students?
So, I mean, a motivation for me is such a simple one, because I will always say to people, if you're not motivated or excited about your life, who else do you think is going to be? Right? Because everybody has got things going on. So, and it's not even something I can borrow you and say, Zaina, I will motivate you. How exactly do I even transfer the motivation? You understand? And you see it, because even if you interact with somebody who's very positive, right? That person can have an impact on you for that particular moment. But if you are not positive, it just washes off you and you move on back to your negative mindset, because that's just not something that you're used to. So I will still say that with a lot of these things, there are underlying issues. It's not so much about, oh, I'm demotivated, on the journey. It's maybe there's an underlying feeling attached to your worthiness. Do you see yourself worth showing up for? Because a lot of us, when things are not going our way, we self-abandon. And as I say, if you are not going to be there for you, and if you are not going to motivate yourself, who do you think is going to come in to do that? Absolutely no one. So it's as simple as, listening to the right content, being around the right people, and getting up and doing it for yourself. No one else is going to come and motivate you. So that's why for me, I think it's as simple as that.
Exactly. Just recognizing self-worth and showing up for yourself is so, so important. It's so important. And then in relation to dealing with stress and anxiety before an exam, how would you have any tips or suggestions or even practices that can help students prepare themselves for exams and tests. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I actually found this one interesting because, I have my own horror stories of, Hall 29. We used to call it something else in my time. HE2 hockey sticks. Don't know if that name is still what is referred to now. And no, okay. So I think that what is anxiety? You need to interrogate. You're anxious because you're anticipating the outcome, you're anticipating the next moment, right? And it takes as much energy to predict a negative outcome as it takes to predict a positive outcome. So you
Yeah.
just have to step back and say to yourself, am I going to apply all this energy and worry about this exam? Or am I going to apply all of this energy and have a positive attitude towards this exam? Because there's no such thing as failure. There's only redirection. That's as simple as it. Like
Yeah.
you can't fail as long as you're still trying and you're putting one foot in front of the other. It's impossible to fail. You only fail when you give up on yourself,
Yes,
right? And for as long as you're still here and you wake up the next day, whoever brought you onto this planet hasn't given up on you. So
yeah.
that's you then just giving up on yourself, right?
Mm.
Um, but from a practical standpoint, definitely breathing exercises is
Mm.
one of those that I would recommend. I mean, I was doing this before I even went into the holistic space, but I didn't realize that it was already in my subconscious. So one thing I didn't like doing was, before you're about to write your exam, everybody's gathering and looking at notes just before we're about to go in. And I just didn't like any of that energy. I was sat far away under a tree somewhere. And then when I would see everybody going into the venue, then I would start making my way. I just didn't feed into all that anxious energy. So because by osmosis, we absorb the energy of the people around us. So if you're in a study group and all everybody's doing is panicking, guess what? You're also going to panic, right? So
Yes.
it's about surrounding yourself with calm energy before the exam. I
Mm.
understand, yes, we've all been there where we were drinking these energy drinks, which obviously I'm against now.
Yes.
There are better ways to, sustain your energy, but even those, they do exacerbate these feelings of anxiety and nervousness before exams. And caffeine also is a very bad one. It does also fuel those feelings of anxiety. So those are also ones that I would look to reducing and engaging in these breathing techniques before exams, taking a moment of stillness. I mean, I've been practicing for many years now as a yogi, right? But even before this podcast, I still had to have a moment of quiet because
Mm.
I'm trying to bring myself towards myself and breathe and remind myself to be calm.
Mm.
Because I find a lot of students will think, oh, once I've like overcome this, the anxiety, my life, everything's sweet. It's really not. It only gets worse because as you go up the levels, what you're asking for and what you need is even bigger, right? So you need to learn to build these coping mechanisms and healthy coping mechanisms early on and how to regulate your nervous system early on so that you're able to move through these bigger life experiences with a lot more ease.
Mm. And would you suggest exercise also as a way to balance stress before the exam and find structure?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I did and it worked for me. I
Mm.
know that there were some people who used to find it very strange because I would still maintain a very healthy balance between study and exercise. And I do give thanks to my sports education teacher from high school
Mm.
because he basically drilled that in us that no matter how hard your academic situation is at a particular moment, taking 30 minutes of exercise actually it does more for you than what you realize, getting that oxygen to your brain, fresh oxygen. So
Mm.
many of us aren't even breathing properly. Like we're all just breathing, thoracic breathing, shallow breathing, all the way to here. And
Mm.
that's damaging to your brain. This is why you have brain fog. You're not able to take the information in. So just having, moments to exercise, to breathe properly, they do so much for your cognitive functions. But as people, we get caught up. We're too busy to do it. We don't find time to balance. But you're actually better off for it in the long run when you learn how to build in those moments while you're still studying.
Mm.
Because I always say it only gets worse when you go to work. You don't realize how much autonomy over your work schedule, over your studying schedule that you have while you're in school. When you're at work, the schedule is even more rigorous than what your study schedule was. Because right now you guys have a 3 month break, whatever between the year, and I think even more breaks. You're not going to get that time, annual leave is not that many days in the year. So
Yeah.
you need to learn, you need to learn to carve out this time in your day early on, and then it will hold you in good stead as you advance in your legal career.
And do you think there is such a thing as not having enough time?
No, we all have 24 hours in a day. And I had to learn this lesson myself when I was requalifying, a new meaning of 24 hours a day, because now you're working, studying, trying to stay healthy. And I laugh because there's all these memes online where it shows somebody who's like, I'm trying to work hard, drink water, have work-life balance, like socialize with my friends, yes, and skincare and all of this. But it's true, you will feel that it's just not possible to do all of these things. But I will still say you owe it to yourself. If you're not going to give yourself that time, nobody else is going to come and say, Zaina, you know what? I think you deserve 30 minutes of exercise. It's not going to happen. You have to be the one to intentionally carve out time in your day, and use your day in a more productive manner. It just comes down to effective time management and you also valuing yourself enough to carve in that time. Maybe it's not sleeping in. Maybe it's waking up earlier and then, doing what you need to do so that by the time the day starts, you've spent time with yourself and then you can give yourself to the world.
And do you think it's important to spend time with yourself before you give yourself to the world to ensure that you're in the correct mindset?
Absolutely. And I think it's very underrated because especially when it comes to work settings, you're surrounded by people constantly. So there isn't that moment of quiet, that moment of solitude. And even if you think about even the family home, you're constantly surrounded by family. So you're not necessarily alone. So it's so important to develop that relationship with yourself, because I think many of us will, we will grow in other aspects of our life, but that personal growth is something that we won't invest in until it's too late. But who will know you better than yourself? But how do you get to know yourself better is actually by spending time with yourself and getting to know Zaina. Like, who is she? What does she like? What doesn't she like? Those are important things to actually do, and quite early on, because it will change. And it's also okay for it to change, but you're never going to know if you don't check in with yourself.
Yes, definitely. And now just moving on to anxiety for interviews. How do you deal with prepping yourself mentally, building up confidence for the interview, and then being confident in the interview when you may suffer from imposter syndrome?
Oh, so I mean, I've actually done a lot of interviews, so I think it's practice. I've had some where I've like done great and some where I haven't done so great, but I forgave myself for the times where I didn't show up the way that I wanted to, because no one is perfect, right? And also not every opportunity is for you. So I think it's also acknowledging that, imposter syndrome, I think, is linked to what I spoke about earlier, self-worth. Like, what do you actually think you're worthy of or deserving of? And that's going to reflect and show up, right? So if you're sitting in front of a specific panel and you already feel like you don't deserve to be there, I think subconsciously you're probably already repelling the opportunity without even realizing it, because our subconscious brain is quite powerful. We just don't realize it, right? And it shows itself up in various ways that we don't realize. Self-sabotage is also one of those. So in the anxiety again that you will feel is only because you're already predicting the outcome and you've decided to spend your energy worrying about the outcome, other than just going in the ebb and flow and also realizing it just might not be your door. because
Mm.
your door is going to fling open. You're not going to have to put muscle behind it. What's meant for you is meant for you.
Yeah.
So there's no real point in that mindset. I don't think you can be stressed, you know. It's about taking that higher approach to some of these paths. You walk differently, and I think you move differently, you speak differently to yourself if you believe that you're worth it and if you believe it's for you. But as soon as there's a little bit of self-doubt, I think then that starts to show up in certain ways. So all of these things are very normal, and it's good to have nerves and be anxious. Performance anxiety is a different type of anxiety, so I should clarify. Performance anxiety is good. You need to, be a little on the edge of like, how's this going to go? Because you don't want to be overconfident. Nobody wants to work with anybody who's too overconfident.
Yes, yes.
But you also don't want to be self-doubting where you're like, it's never going to happen for me. I'm not good enough. So you want to just reach a natural, healthy balance and then move accordingly. But I think ultimately your self-belief is what's going to carry you. You believing that you're worthy of that opportunity, I think that's what you need.
Yes, even before the interview and after the interview.
Yes.
Definitely. Definitely. And just in relation to resilience, when it comes to now, let's say you're in the VAC program or you on the selection day and you mess up one task. How do you not let that task get to your head and let it ruin the entire program?
I mean, I think it's also reframing what does messing up mean, and in context to the bigger picture, what does messing up mean, right? Because I think all of us, as I say, we tend to have a propensity to exaggerate damage in our minds.
Yes.
And we've all been there. We've all been there where we're like, oh, I said the wrong thing. Absolutely no way I'm going to make it through because I said the thing in the most important part of the thing. But as I say, like fate and destiny really do have a hand in these things, because you might surprise yourself and then actually make it through the selection day, even though you thought, oh my word, I've messed up the biggest part. So in the moment, when you, and I would backtrack to say again, when you're self-aware and you're constantly engaged in mindfulness practices, it's always about drawing our attention to the present moment. And when you reach that point of presentness, is that even a word? When you when you're that present in the moment, it would be, said thing happened at 2 o'clock, and at 2:05 I've moved past it because it's already in the past. That is actually what a present mindset is, and it's still something that I'm also working on. But you have to learn to move. If you've messed something up at 2 o'clock in that day, 2 o'clock's passed. But you know how you can look at it. 2 o'clock has passed, but I still have 3 more hours in front of me. So are you going to now make sure that you make the best out of the 3 hours that are left, or are you going to worry about one thing that happened? So this is why I say that mindset, self-awareness, positive mindset, these things are so important because they really do determine how you move in those moments of failure, of perceived failure. And as I said, it's all about showing up for yourself, right? Even when things don't go your way. So it's about forgiving yourself in that moment. Okay, at 2 o'clock, I may not necessarily have showed up the best way, but I'm going to change that moving forward for the next 3 hours. And that comes with forgiving yourself instantaneously. But you need to also interrogate, if you're not able to forgive yourself, why is that the case? Why do you hold yourself to that standard? Or why do you decide to be so hard on yourself that you don't want to move forward from the moment? So that's why I say a lot of these things, it's underlying psychological factors that we don't necessarily have enough time to interrogate.
Yes, yes. So memories play a very crucial part in our lives, basically.
Absolutely.
To try and overcome all of our self-doubts, we just have to dig deep, find these memories, and find a way to not only wrap our heads around the memories, but to somehow let it go and develop ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. And now, hypothetically, obviously there are a few students, students in life, many students in life who may not get their first interview or their second interview or even their first third interview.
Yeah.
What should someone do in the aftermath of receiving job rejection to manage their emotions and to maybe not do something that's detrimental to their development?
Oh, I mean, do you know what I used to do was just delete immediately in my inbox, out the delete box. That's what I used to do. Yep, no negativity here. And I know that you laugh, but I'm actually serious. You know, when I was applying to London the first time, I probably applied to 100 firms and I got rejected by all of them. But I'm not even just trying to be funny. I literally delete the rejection because I decide not to internalize it. I literally am just like, it's not my door, it's not my people.
Yes,
My door is on the way. My people are on the way. So as
exactly.
long as you move like that, you move on. You have to move on. There's no point in dwelling in rejection. You are choosing to rob yourself and your future if you decide to dwell in that rejection. Everyone is going to get rejected. And I know right now you're at the infancy and you feel like this is the biggest rejection. It's really not. As I say, you in the journey, you are going to still go through more interviews and more rejection. So you need to
Yes.
build that resilience early on. And also, as I say, if it's really affecting you that much to see these words, oh, I regret, I decline to, what do they say? Unfortunately, we want to,
And
whatever we say, or we regret to inform you.
we regret
I
to
don't know.
inform you that you
Yeah,
have been
yeah,
unsuccessful in your
yeah, yeah.
application.
I mean, you know, it's so unfortunate because I actually did want to post about this publicly, within my thought leadership journey, but I actually couldn't find the emails because I really do delete them. I actually just don't internalize them. So unfortunately, I don't have the evidence to prove how many times I've been rejected because they just don't exist in my inbox anymore. I move
Don't
on.
worry, I'll send you one of mine.
No, delete.
I'm
Move
just,
on.
I'm trying. Um, and I'm sure a lot of other students are trying as well. But I think, unfortunately, because we're in an environment where a lot of people are expected to be at a certain place and have these and have been signed already, or it's difficult to just not only experience the rejection but also try gain the positives out of the rejection. So how would you suggest to students, what can they learn from rejections?
As I said, rejection is literally redirection.
Mm.
And it's unfortunate because people are not vulnerable enough to tell the stories about how rejection has benefited them. I have many stories. We just don't have enough time on this podcast
Okay,
where,
drop one.
where I'll just talk about it more generally, but I have many stories where objectively, I would literally, if I had the option to go back, I would also be putting sandbags behind that door, and hinges and locks and bolts, and saying it was best that this door was kept closed because it actually wasn't for me. Although devastating at the time, in hindsight, being like, wasn't my opportunity, wasn't really going to work out, right? And I know that before I did make light of just rejecting the emails and things like that, but we have been conditioned to think you need to be at a certain place at a certain time. You need to do things at a certain time. And as I say, in law school, it's very difficult because everybody's moving at the same timeline. Everybody wants to have articles at a certain point, wants to have VACted whatever many firms at a certain point. And the environment's making it worse because that's all everybody's talking about all the time, constantly, day in and day out, right? But as I say, you need to be intentional about protecting your own mindset. If you know that those it's not good for you to hear those things, don't be around those people that are constantly talking about it. Because
Mm.
that's also you have the power to decide what you're going to take in, right? If
Mm.
you don't necessarily want to hear about all of that, don't hang out with those people. And
Mm.
that's not you not being happy for anybody, but it's you taking care of your own mental health, that you know what, I'm not in a place to hear how many people have been signed and I'm not. I step back from it. You don't have to participate. But people don't have the, I don't want to say is it the willpower, but I think they love to be in these spaces and exchange this information. Whereas you're just conditioned to think that way. You don't really need to know anything. You choose to want to know that information. You right now have chosen, oh, I want to know who's going to this firm and that firm, but you're hurting yourself, right? Because by you knowing that, all you're thinking is, I didn't get that opportunity. Right. So you choose what information you want to absorb and what you don't need to absorb, and keep moving on. As I say, there's no such thing as rejection. It's only redirection. And if your path is looking like other people's paths, it doesn't, all it means is that you're on a different journey. And I think how exciting, everybody else who's going a certain way, the outcome is almost already predetermined. Whereas with you, if it's not yet clear what's going on, that means there's other plans for you that haven't yet revealed themselves. So maybe you look at it like that.
Exactly. Like a door, as cliche as this quote is, every door that's closed opens up another door, you know?
If my favorite one that I love about closed doors is, if there's a closed door, you find the window. Because the window allows you to have a different perspective, a different vantage point. So why you might not even need to look for another door. Maybe you just need to change your perspective.
And how can students take the positives, like the window, and how can students look at the positives in everything? Because usually when a rejection letter comes, now you are just filled with negative thoughts and all these things and self-doubt. How can students now focus on the positives and focus on, okay, this is not for me, but something else is?
So from a practical perspective, it's about, I would say it's affirmations, because that's what I used to do. I would affirm myself. As I say, I'm literally not my opportunity. My opportunity is on the way. Not my people are on the way.
Yes.
Not my opportunity. My opportunity is even closer to coming to fruition. It's literally about reprogramming yourself, your subconscious. One thing about negativity and misery loves company, and negativity, once you start going down that road, you spiral down. I would always have something where I would say I would only give myself 24 hours to be negative. And then after that, no more. That's why I move on and I delete emails, because I move on. Yeah. So 24 hours is all. I'm not saying don't be down, because that's also not realistic. We're human. We have emotions. Your emotions fluctuate. But it's also about acknowledging, what emotions do I want to keep living in, and which ones can I put an early end to, because they're not that healthy for me, or they to my detriment. 24 hours, delete the email. My people are on the way. My opportunity is going to reveal itself to me. I'm looking at those people. I'm like, well, their outcome is already determined. Mine is still yet to be revealed. How exciting! I wonder what's in store for me. Move on.
Life's the journey, and we just need to carry on growing until we find it.
That's it. Because also, Zaina, one thing is, I think we do get caught up into wanting certain opportunities and opening certain doors. But we also have to talk about what's on the other side, because you have certain expectations. And what if it's not what you think it's going to be? So you're going to have to learn to deal with those feelings of disappointment. And disappointment happens at all points of the journey. It's not only now when you're a student, even when you're working, it's the same thing. You might not get the increase you're looking for, the promotion you're looking for, the next job you're looking for. It's a part of life. But again, as a student or in the legal profession, we have this tendency to exaggerate the damage in our minds. We think it's do or die. If I'm not at the big five, my life is over. And that is literally not true.
Yes. That's very, very, very inspirational words that I think most students need to know, because I think we're just so focused on what is the traditional route and what we think that we should be doing, that a lot of the time we don't even focus on the various opportunities that exist around us and that we can do with our LLB. And then just in relation to feedback, do you think that students should ask for feedback, and how should students handle feedback?
So just to clarify, do you mean feedback after like a VAC work or feedback after rejection?
Feedback after rejection. Okay, let's do both. Feedback after VAC work and then feedback after rejection.
I mean, after VAC work, asking for feedback is, I don't know, to my mind, maybe leaning towards more self-doubt, right? Because are you doubting your performance at back work? Are you not sure that they're going to sign you? I don't know why you would then say, hey, I just want to know how I did. I'm not sure about asking for feedback after VAC work specifically. Often interview rejection, I would say yes, and I have actually done this myself as well. Not immediately when you get the rejection email, like, dear so and so, I see you've rejected me. Please, can I understand? No, I mean, like, maybe months down the line. Nothing wrong, and it's for connection building. There's nothing wrong with then emailing said person and saying, understand that this was the outcome. Is there a particular reason? Is there anything I could have done better? And the reason why you'd want that information is that that's how you're going to get better.
Yes.
Because in them explaining, oh, we ended up taking so and so because of XYZ, you're also able to understand your positioning and the context of your rejection. And I think that's one of the most important things about rejection is understanding the context, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of law students are upset about being rejected. But what's the context? If said law firm can only take a certain number of people, then the rejection really doesn't have anything to do about you as a person. It's just the system. It's a numbers game. And whenever it's a numbers game, then it cannot never be personal. It's not because we don't like Zaina. It's just because we have limited seats at this table, and that it is what it is, and it's something we need to acknowledge. But people don't want to talk about that because it's easy for us to blame ourselves and think, oh, it's me. I don't know about that. Maybe look at the system and think, why are there only 30 seats? Is it realistic for there to be only 30 seats when there are 400 graduates coming out of law school? Maybe that's the question we should rather be asking, but it's easier for you to feel bad about yourself. So I don't know. That's my view on it.
And just handling like feedback when it comes to, let's say they highlight a specific skill of yours, like let's say your writing skills, your research skills, your presentation skills. What should you do with that feedback?
You got to work on what they say. You have to, and that's something that you need to learn early on. If somebody's flagging to say, this is something that we've identified, and I mean, this for me, it's sticky because there is constructive feedback and then there's other feedback. So I think also be discerning in who is giving the feedback, and you want to get feedback from people that you trust. I think that's a very important thing. So that's why that network we spoke about earlier is so important, because if you have those mentors or in front of you and you tell them, this is the feedback I've gotten, you sort of have people to bounce it off and them to say, okay, these are parts you can take on and work on, these parts not so much, and you move on. So getting feedback from trusted people, I would say, is most valuable, because not all feedback is good feedback.
That is so, I've never heard someone actually say, question the types of people that give the feedback. I think as a law student, just because you get feedback from the law firm, then you immediately think, okay, these are from all the people that were involved in it, but they never really specify who is involved in the process and that stuff. So I think it is something for law students to actually recognize, and it'll also help alleviate some of the self-doubt that they feel, because they don't know where it comes from sometimes, and and maybe other times they themselves can internally look at areas that they need to improve on, and then that the firm brings to their light, and then just bridge the gap between that, because I think as a law student, you yourself know your strengths and your weakness, and when someone is bringing it to your attention, then it's highlighting that this is something that you need to work on. Yeah. So just now, now we just need to focus on general advice, okay, that you have for law students. So this is our last question, and we are hoping that you'll impart the copious amounts of wisdom and experience that you had into a 3-part question, basically. So the first question is, what advice would you give to yourself in first year, when you were in first year? What advice do you wish you could give yourself at the end of your career? And then what advice do you wish you could give yourself as a practicing CA?
Okay, can you ask me one at a time?
Yes.
And then I'll because that's like,
Yeah,
it's
that
too
is
much
a
of
whole lot.
it's
Yes.
a mouthful.
It's a
Yeah,
mouthful,
yeah.
definitely. Usually I just quick fire and then I think it just helps them think about the next question as it going.
Okay.
So what advice would you give yourself as a first year CA? Oh, sorry, as a first year in university?
Oh, this is an interesting question. I like this question though. I would say you're smarter than what you think you are.
Hmm.
I would say this is only the beginning.
Hmm.
And I think I would say have fun. You
Hmm.
know, I think one thing that we may not necessarily value at law school is fun,
Hmm.
because there's no, the space for failure seems so marginal that we think if we take our eye off the ball, even for 5 minutes, our whole life is going to be ruined.
Yes.
And that's not true. So I definitely understand all of those feelings of feeling like every moment has to be curated and calculated and intentional. But
Hmm.
at the same time, you're very young and you're only going to be that young once.
Yes.
So as much as, yes, you need to focus on the academics and the goals, also just have fun. It's life, and it's your life, your personal growth is running concurrently to your career. So
Hmm.
you want to also be investing equal amounts of time in these things.
Hmm.
And finally, what I say to myself in first year, it's okay to change your mind.
Yeah.
Because again, I think having just fixed goals, fixed mindset at that stage, probably not healthy. I think it's good to know that it's okay to be flexible, because things aren't always going to go my way.
Yeah.
And the sooner you realize that a flexible mindset is just better, I think the better you're going to be for the rest of the journey.
Yes. Because I mean, when we're in first year, you also don't realize that you're 18. As much as people say that you're an adult, it's the beginning of your adulthood. You have space to doubt. You have time to, grow from your mistakes, everything. And I think a lot of first years just don't realize that, and they think that everything's a be all and end all. And then now onto the second question. What advice do you wish you could give yourself at the end of law school?
Oh, the end of law school. I would say it's going to get better.
Hmm.
Um, because I don't know, the end for me was bittersweet. And in
Hmm.
hindsight, I think I didn't realize the natural feelings of mourning that
Hmm.
you're going to feel, because you're leaving that academic environment, and you're now going into a completely different environment.
Hmm.
And I did speak about autonomy over your time.
Hmm.
It's also mourning that the last time you're going to have autonomy, well, I mean, of course, you'll argue to say you don't have autonomy because obviously your exams are set for certain times, your tests are set for certain times, but I still think you have more control over your time when you're in
Yes.
uni, right? So I think, yeah, you're going to mourn, and I think it's normal. But one thing I wish I did is understand the transition a whole lot better,
Hmm.
because I think we're very quick to go into the next thing. We're very excited to start work and, go into this real life adulting without realizing that it is a different ballgame completely.
Hmm.
And you don't know what you don't know,
Hmm.
and you can't be prepared for everything. No matter how much you try and you prepare and you plan and you talk to this one and that one, your journey is always going to have a unique set of challenges that maybe nobody around you has seen.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think my advice would be that I think I wish I had more time to just sit and reflect more on that transition and appreciate myself more for actually achieving everything that I had achieved at that point in time, smiled my roses, given myself my flowers before going on to the next, because we're very quick to get into the next one and not even acknowledge that it is a big milestone to have an academic qualification, something that's worth to be celebrated. But so many of us just like, yeah, well, on to the next thing we go. Yes, and it's that. And I learned that later on in life, that you need to savor those moments. You don't need to rush. Celebrate as much as you can and for as long as you can, and then you move gently on to the next part of your journey.
Yes, yes. And just regarding your transition from university to working and your period as like a CA, how was that?
Oh, no, this was a while ago. But as I say, I think I recall it being different. I recall thinking this is very different to what I thought it would be. And one thing that comes to mind is I remember my super get marked and go home. There's a lot more that's going to happen. And that sort of woke me up to, okay, it's not that you're not just going to hand in your work and go home. There's unspoken rules. There's work after work. There's a lot more that's going into this set dynamic that you're not ready for. And as I say, I don't think you can be prepared. But you can prepare yourself. You can do the internal work, of course, and that's where your mindfulness practices and having that strong self-esteem and that internal dialogue is going to matter, because you are going to come up against things that you're not ready for, and you're young. I really think we don't speak enough about the fact that you are actually really young, like being 21 and being 22, 21, 22, and assuming all that responsibility. It's not easy. It's really not easy. And also having a restriction on your freedom. It's not easy. And this is a decision that you made when you were 18, when you were 19. And it's up to you whether you determine whether that's going to be the rest of your life or whether you're going to change. And that's why I say things like having a growth mindset, a flexible mindset, positive mindset, those things are really going to matter.
Yes, yes. And do you have any advice for the CAs? Or do you wish you could give, no, sorry. Do you have any advice for current CAs, or advice that you wish you could give yourself when you were a CA beyond what you previously stated?
I mean, I would definitely say no decision is a bad decision. No experience is a wasted experience. Finding the lesson in every moment, leveraging every opportunity. Those, I think, are the most important things that I would say to myself. And also, it doesn't get easier. You just get better.
That's amazing. And on that note, I would like to say thank you for coming onto this podcast, imparting your wisdom and every single piece of advice that you gave, because I'm sure law students throughout the country and maybe students internationally that listen to this will benefit from every single aspect that you touched on. And hopefully CAs will also listen to your advice and realize that not everything they do is incorrect, and there's always lessons to learn from their mistakes. But thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, and I hope that you enjoyed the experience.
I did, and thank you so much for having me. I really still commend you on this amazing initiative. I think we need more of these. We need more honest, candid conversations about the legal fraternity, because in having these kinds of spaces, it can only alleviate that anxiety, that stress, that depression that people are feeling. For you to understand it is normal. What you're going through, other people have gone through it. The only difference is that they're not talking about it.
Yes.
That is all. So you take comfort in people that can tell you that it's normal, it's part of life. but there's a lot of internal work that you're going to have to do. No one is going to give you anything. You're not entitled to anything. You're going to have to work extremely hard for everything, but it's not impossible, and it is an enjoyable journey. I know that a lot of people who listen to these are thinking it's not worth it. It doesn't sound enjoyable. It is. We only tell you the parts you need to be cautionary about, but there are many, many fun moments. It's the best and worst days of your life all together, because life is all about duality.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, Khanyi will be having monthly webinars focused on different aspects of mental health for law students, and we have so many amazing topics for them. So just, Khanyi, do you want to speak on some of the topics, or should we just give them monthly updates as they come out?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's not divulge everything because we want them to tune in and listen. But the first one did we decide on was understanding mental health and well-being in the legal profession.
Yes.
And I think the intention is just to give more color into the structure, because I think once you understand the structure and the end goal of a law firm or in-house, you understand how you're going to navigate that space and negotiate your way in that environment. So I think that might just help people, because that's sort of a high level bird's eye view, objective perspective that I wish I had when I was still in early career.
Yes. And we are all so excited to hear. So thank you so much. And everyone tune in on the 23rd or 24th of October. And that's when our first webinar will be. Okay. Thank you again, Khanyi. Okay.
Thank you. And I'm so looking forward to it.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Seize the light within yourself. With love, the lantern.